to this edition of the YAHOWAH vlog. I'm your host, Craig Winn. We are going to continue our series on the Mother Goddess. In this case, we're going to delve deeper into the events of Gan Eden. The narrative that God provides turns out to be prophetic of many of the issues that have been raised by this cult that has sought to discredit Yada and YadaYahowah. And God had a lot to say about them, and it was not kind. But before we go there, since Dowd, our Messiah and King, known as David, our Savior and returning King, had a lot to say of them as well. He recognized that he was the tree of lives and that I am the tree of knowledge as it relates to Yahweh's plan, and that we are intertwined. And so he is the one who used the verbal root of tree, which is Etzah. Etzah is the feminine of tree, is how it's used in the presentation of the Choter, speaking of the Etzah that is Dayath, the tree of knowledge. The verbal root is Etzah. It's written identically in the Hebrew. It's just vocalized slightly differently. But it is the actionable root that defines tree. And here it is. This is what Dowd used it to say. And the one who closes, the one who shuts out, this is the advice and counsel regarding the totality of the plan and its purpose, as the instruction is provided after consultation and calculation, all to assist in the decision-making process after thoughtful deliberation. Their eyes to the proper and full accounting and the overall determined value of the thoroughly considered and recorded plan. That one, nothing more than an annoying insect, malicious, blood-sucking mosquito, and hypocritical pursuit of slanderous and malicious speech. So someone who would try to foreclose on the tree of knowledge, on the EtzDayath, who is the Choter, therefore on Yada and YadaYahowah. That one, according to our Messiah and King, is like an annoying insect, a malicious, blood-sucking mosquito, and hypocritical pursuit of slanderous and malicious speech. Hallucinating and confusing in a perverse and irrational manner, becoming entirely evil, determined to advance that which is completely wrong, doing so in the end and thereby perishing in their depravity. That comes from Mashal Word Pictures, Proverbs 16:30. You can rest assured, particularly after our venture into the 33rd, 4th, and 5th Psalms, the Mizmor of Dowd, that our Messiah and King is fully appraised of the hideous actions of this Mother Goddess cult, and he is disgusted, as is God. And it tends to hold them accountable and wants us to present these prophetic insights regarding them to annul everything that they have attempted to do. So God hasn't heretofore, as he has presented the conditions in the garden, missed an opportunity to paint portraits with words. So we should expect nothing less going forward. After introducing the fellows who would serve humanity over the next 6,000 years as the tree of lives and the tree of knowledge, he turned his attention to the man that he conceived to benefit from them. It reads, Yahweh Almighty relationally grasped hold of the man, Adam, and he settled him restfully in the Gan, this sheltered and protective garden of Eden, of great joy and pleasure, total satisfaction, to work it, to labor in her, to serve within it and cultivate it, and to closely observe and carefully consider it, to pay close attention. This is Abad and Shamar. These are the things that Adam did not do. He was not observant, not at all. He did not work. There's no indication he did anything that could be considered valuable, that he made no contribution. He was conceived to be observant and to make a contribution, and he did neither. So it's important that you know how he was introduced. Most people don't know that Adam was specifically conceived and placed in this sheltered garden so that he could make a contribution, so he could abad, so he could work, and so that he could closely examine and carefully consider what was there. This is what God wanted. This is what God expected. This is what God wants from you and me. This is what he expects from you and me, for us to make a contribution and for us to be observant. If you are not these things, you will not be invited back into the garden when he reopens the doors to a larger garden, our planet, on the 7th of October, beginning of Sukkah in 2033. This is from Bereshith, Genesis 2:15. Well, clearly, fathers lakak. They grasp hold of their children so that they can stand up and walk with them. That said, there are 5 hands in Yahweh's name. I don't know if you know that, but there's 2 men standing up, reaching up. Each of them have a pair of hands. And then you have Yahweh's hand with his upper arm coming down, his forearm reaching out with an upper hand being extended to those 2 people standing up, reaching up in his name. So there are 5 hands in Yahweh's name, with the largest of them reaching down and out to the people in his Shem so that he can grab hold of us and lift us up, as fathers are wont to do. It's a verbal picture of God's intent, even in his name. That's why it was a shame to have erased it, as the religious have done. Continuing to tie these stories together, after introducing the central cast, Yahweh used Nuach, settled spiritually, to foretell how the Ruach spirit of Yahweh would Nuach al-Hu, settle upon and remain upon the man serving as the Choter. Read Yashaya 11, and you will see that it is the spirit of Yahweh and the 7 spirits that Nuach settle spiritually upon the Choter as the Tree of Lives, just as they're being presented here. Now, the realization that Gan is from Gana and means to shelter, to protect, to cover, and defend reminds us that the intent of Sukkah, shelters, is identical with that which is being presented here, because it is from the verbal root sakak, which is defined identically: shelter, protect, cover, and defend. The name of the garden, of course, we know is Eden, and it means joyous. The letters forming this delightful moniker reveal that the doorway to life can be seen here. A marvelous pictorial presentation of what God was trying to achieve, especially since he asked us to be observant. The doorway to life can be seen here. Now, this means that we find Dowd as the Tree of Lives because he opened the door to life on Passover when he fulfilled it in 33 CE in his second of 3 lives. We're reminded that this man was conceived to abad, to work with God, to make a contribution. And that means that we should as well, whenever and wherever we are planted. It is our highest calling in life. Moshe, Dowd, Eliah, and Yada. We all serve as examples of men whose lives are committed to collaborating with Yahweh and doing whatever he requests. And as we know from the Torah, God's foremost request of us is to shamar, to be observant. What's the purpose of being observant? You look with your eyes, you see the very testimony of God, you ponder it, you come to conclusions, you come to learn, to know, and to understand. And so you're in a position to have an intelligent conversation with God, to do as God would have us do, to learn from him, to grow. These are the purposes of being observant, closely examining and carefully considering his revelations. When we do these things, we're rewarded, as has been the case with examining these events pursuant to the garden. We will be rewarded for closely examining them, carefully considering them, particularly how the characters in this story relate to one another, and even the trees as central characters in this narrative. Now, right from the onset, as a caring father, Yahweh provided instructions for us to follow such that our lives might be long, productive, and fulfilling. This is the very first thing communicated between God and man. And you'll notice that Yahweh did the talking such that Adam listened. This is the pattern God established for our benefit. And while we remain on the earth, it continues. In other words, stop praying. Start listening. If you're yabbering to God to tell him all the things you want, you are not part of his family. He is not listening to you. It is our responsibility to listen to God and then to respond accordingly. If you don't listen to him and you're talking to him, praying to him, then I can assure you, you are not on the same page with the Almighty. Yahweh, who is God, he provided direction. He instructed. He spoke clearly and unequivocally with authority to benefit and equip the man on an ongoing basis, written in the Peeled and Perfect third person, masculine singular, concerning the man, saying, from every tree of Gan, of the sheltered garden, you may continually and actually eat. From every tree, you can continually and actually eat. You can genuinely devour and consume consistently and enthusiastically, being fed and nurtured. Call infinitive, call imperfect. Imperfect means ongoing. This was not a one-time event. You can consistently and continually eat from every tree in the garden. So they had the opportunity to take their choice. When Yahweh shared this instruction in the Peeled and Perfect, he revealed it, what was really just for man's benefit, and saying that it would affect his life in a meaningful and ongoing way, just depending on how we responded to it. This is to say that the Chaw'ah, the direction and instruction, was enabling and sustaining. Moreover, as a friendly reminder, throughout we find Yahweh speaking in a masculine singular voice, which is important. Now, while it's subtle, all actually means that God was over the man, as well as in proximity before him. It is important because God can't become a man. God is not a man. God was present only in the sense that a tiny aspect of his nature was projected into this environment. Further, as we know, Ha-Adam is literally rendered as the man, whereas Adam is simply a transliteration of the Hebrew noun for man. Now, before we press on, you'll notice that Yahweh said that Adam could eat from any tree in the garden, with a call, eat, repeated twice for emphasis, absolutely and unequivocally eat. This is important because Chaw'ah misrepresented this instruction in her discussion with Satan. And then addressing the tree of knowledge, a call was negated and not repeated, buttressed by the imperfect conjugation to say, you should not make a habit of continually eating from it. This is because, as a consequence, during a day, you will absolutely die, with muth repeated to underscore this consequence. Also, please note, Yahweh's subsequent instruction pertained exclusively to the tree of knowledge. This is because he didn't want its purpose preempted or its fruit consumed before the door to life was opened. However, God continued, from the tree, the Etz, this productive, upright life with firmly embedded roots and branches, which reach up to absorb the light of the sun, from Etzah, as we know, and Etzah, to provide counsel and advice through diligence and effort on the entirety of the plan, for the purpose of developing a backbone while overcoming challenges to advocate a proper response. Of Dayath, of the knowledge, of awareness, of skillful acquisition of important information through observation, along with the exercise of good judgment, leading to understanding, the ability to make rational connections between appropriate aspects among discernible and discoverable evidence, by being discriminating, perceptive, and judicial. It's a noun that is based upon the verb yada, to know in a relational sense, becoming aware and familiar, of tob, of good, proper, productive, and pleasing. Tob is that which is beneficial and prosperous, correct and truthful, favorable, enjoyable, desirable, and agreeable, moral and right, valuable, worthy, even beautiful, generous, pleasant, festive, joyful. All of these things are tob. And also of raw, bad, wrong, troubling, and harmful. Raw is evil and wicked, pertaining to corrupt compatriots. Yeah, raw is also one's associates, those that you group together with, fellow mosquitoes, if you will. Morally inappropriate, malignant, and disagreeable rhetoric from loudmouthed associates, words and actions which are of no value, depraved, displeasing, and malicious. Do not make a habit of continuing to eat. Lo a call. Do not habitually devour or consume. Call imperfect from it or out of him. Men who, because of him, masculine, singular. As a consequence, because as a result, during that day, by defining and describing yourself as having consumed it, here is a call ata men hu, devouring by you will actually and eternally destroy you because of him. It's the call infinitive, where the verb takes the attributes of a noun in the construct form, a literal verbal noun, binding the action to you. You will become what you eat. You will come to personify death, if you do, and you will die, ceasing to exist forevermore. You will perish, removed from the living, eternally destroying your soul. Barashith in the beginning, Genesis 2:17. Since there was no religious, no political, no conspiratorial corruption in the garden, there were no militants, lies, or liars. There was no merit in pursuing an education on what's wrong with these human contrivances. As someone who has written 13 books systematically refuting Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, I know that the process of excoriating these plagues is laborious. It's frustrating. Indeed, it can be miserable and exasperating at times due to the proliferation of logical fallacies and immoral principles. And it is of limited utility. since there are far too few who capitalize on the monumental undertaking and many who viciously condemn the result. And yet, Yahweh recognizes that today, Babel, Twistianity, and goddamn religion, there's 13 books under the YadaYahowah series, free at YadaYah.com, are actually required reading, because the clutter must be cleared away for the truth to be seen. What was deadly then is now essential. YadaYahowah and the Yahweh vlog have quite literally become the tree of knowledge, without which there is no way back to Dowd and the tree of lives. And this is why we're told that prematurely devouring it would be destructive, leading to continual and unrelenting death. My good friend Rich, the king of the cables, has recognized I got a little scratchy throat, and he brought me even more green tea. It wasn't that kind of effect because of the scene that he had displayed here. You saw him walk around the studio. Now you know for certain that this camera that is panning the great outdoors, that this camera, if I see, I just touched it with my hand. That's at the end of my desk. That is the view that we have now over my left shoulder. I'm looking at exactly that same view with that light ball that's floating around in the swimming pool and the ocean in the background. It is a lovely setting that we get to broadcast these programs. It's like being in our own Garden of Eden.
I'll pay more attention next time.
Pardon?
I'll pay more attention next time before I walk in front of
Yeah, I bet you didn't know that you were doing so. But it was very kind. I'm just pointing out that it was considerate of you and kind of you to recognize that I did have a scratchy throat, and that it's good that I have more green tea to resolve that. So here we are. We've been told by Yahweh they can eat anything they want, free will and all. But with this one tree, it happens to be the tree of knowledge. God says nothing about the other tree, the tree of lives, premature. He just said on this one tree, if you eat from it prematurely at this time, the consequence is death. It's premature. You are not going to take the fruit of this tree before this tree is ready to offer its fruit. And this tree isn't actually ready to offer its fruit for 6,000 years.
It's coming up.
Yeah. Some 32 years shy of 6,000 years to be exact. This tree was called back into action and began to grow to offer its fruit on Teruah in 2001. So we are now 24 years into the production of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. It is all being shared with you under this series. This is the YadaYahowah series, To Know Yahweh, rather appropriate title for the tree of knowledge. This is the first of 35 books in that series. It's called An Introduction to God, which sounds appropriate, doesn't it? This is volume 1. It is Debatim Words. 34 volumes follow this one. And so it just wasn't time yet. It would be another almost 6,000 years before the tree of knowledge would sprout up. And that tree of knowledge was introduced again by the great prophet Yeshayah, Isaiah, when he spoke of the Choter. The Choter is a stem off of the main branch, used as a title to describe stem, branch, sucker, to describe that, yes, this is a tree. Those are things all related to trees. And it then says the next thing, he's rooted, deeply rooted, Sheresh, which trees are, that he is a Nazir, which means that he is an observant branch. Again, another tree reference. And among the 7 spirits that are offered to him, the fourth, and the fifth are Etzah, the tree of Dayath, knowledge. So clearly, when we're speaking of the Choter, he is the one who is Parah. Specifically, we're told that he is Parah, which means he's fruitful and productive. He is the tree of knowledge, and that tree of knowledge would not be called into action to bear fruit until it was time to be consumed by Yisrael, so that they would understand what was right and wrong about things like Judaism and their issues related to politics and not trusting Yahweh, as well as what Yahweh's message was actually all about all along. So what was of negative consequence prematurely is now essential. Yahowah, this Yahowah blog, have become the tree of knowledge. And without them, there is no way back to Dowd, to David, because I was the first to present Dowd David as the tree of lives, affirming that he fulfilled Pesach, which opened the doorway to life, and that he lived 3 lives, 2 of which already, and the third one upcoming with his return with Yahweh on the day of reconciliations in 2033. Now, this is why we are told that prematurely devouring this tree and this fruit before it had a chance to take root, to grow, to flower, to develop, would be deadly. It's the reason why you may be aware that there's a statement in Bamidbar, Numbers 15, that after Yahweh goes to great lengths to describe the role of the ram, Dowd, the bull, Yada, and the goat, Eliah, in the restoration of his people, he goes through a whole dissertation on this because they need to be restored, because this is right after the spies claimed that they saw Nephilim in the land. There was no Nephilim, but they're speaking of their own fall. Naphal means to fall. It's going to plays right off of this story where God caused the fall and the fall of man. And he said that everyone over 20 is going to die. And they did, except for 2 men, the 2 men that were exceedingly courageous and bold. But all of the others, particularly those that saw the imaginary giants in the land, they were going to die. And that left only those who were under 20 years old to wander 40 years in the wilderness to get their act together so that they could finally be taken to the promised land. And at the end of that narration, we have Yahweh presenting the plan of restoration with the ram, the bull, and the goat. And a very detailed and inspiring, uplifting presentation in Bamidbar Numbers 15. I've done a program here on the Yahowah blog about it. Then that transitions into God speaking of a man who on the Shabbat, which would be the 7th day, and we're approaching that now, uprooted 2 trees. He didn't pick up sticks, as it is claimed, that he uprooted trees. And in the process of doing that, Yahweh said, no, that won't work. You need to kill him. You need to understand how serious an affront this is to my plan. These trees cannot be uprooted before their time. Without these trees, there is no way back. You need the tree of lives. You need the tree of knowledge. And there it is, right there in the midst of the Torah, and a very descriptive presentation indeed of precisely why you can't deflower and consume this fruit of this tree before it's ready. It's counterproductive, and without it having the chance to grow and develop and produce its fruit to be productive, this way, be fruitful in this way, the Choter would be inspired by the 7 spirits of Yahweh as that tree, then there is no way back to Dowd, because no one knows what Dowd accomplished, opening the door to life. So this is very, very serious with Yahweh. So anyway, that is exactly how it would all transpire with YadaYahowah, reintroducing mankind to God's plan to enable the bereth through the mikre as prescribed in the Torah and fulfilled as is portrayed throughout the Nabi prophets. Without this knowledge, there is no salvation. There's no reconciliation. There is no eternal life. the lesser luminary would have to serve as a sign of the Moed to reflect the sun's brilliance. Since we must address the realization that once introduced, nothing more is said about the Tree of Lives, let's continue to pursue the reasons that fruit of the Tree of Knowledge was protected by God and why it was coveted by Satan. Because it is the Tree of Knowledge then that would introduce the Tree of Lives. And this is going to also explain why Chawah coveted it too. And with that in mind, I think the answer is fairly obvious. Without Dayath presented by Yada and YadaYahowah, no one on earth is aware of what Dowd accomplished by fulfilling Chawah. So it's not only that Dowd became the Tree of Lives, is that without YadaYahowah and Yada disclosing that to you in these 35 books, all free at YadaYah.com, no one knows what he accomplished. There is no eternal life for anyone. And since God chooses to work through people in this regard, he chose these two trees. He discussed them and introduced us to them 6,000 years ago. And they're just now being properly identified. So, without being aware of what Dowd accomplished by fulfilling Chawah in particular, there is no entry into God's covenant family. And without YadaYahowah, no one knows that Dowd fulfilled Chawah, much less even realizes what Chawah represents. That is the fruit of Yada, the Choter, and YadaYahowah. Literally, without this knowledge, there would be no Shabuah Katsir. That's a harvest. There would be no Teruah Lakat. That's a gleaning. The purging of the adulterous woman, representing the mortal remnant of religious Israel, would not happen. There would be no family reunion for the king on Yom Kippurim, and thus no homecoming, and therefore no restoration of Gan Eden or return to it on Sukkah. None of it happens. The human experience and experiment would be for naught. As such, EtzDayath and its Choter, the stem off the main branch, who would become the living embodiment of the Tree of Knowledge, well, he was worth protecting by Yahweh to give him time to learn and to bear fruit. And this explains why Satan and Chawah covered it, why they wanted to control it, why they chose to devour it, thereby eliminating its productiveness. This story is about painting a picture of the parameters and environment Yahweh favors to enjoy the kind of relationship he envisions with mankind. This is something God wants us humans, because a select few of us are being afforded the opportunity to return to this Gan Eden. And for this to occur, the Tree of Knowledge must be restored and explored. It must bear this fruit. Also, this narrative explains how, why, when, and where man's relationship with God was destroyed. This is something which must be understood, of course, if it is to be restored. You have to know where you went wrong to get it right. For this to transpire, the lessons that very few have considered must be presented such that they are understood, and that the instruction then becomes actionable, tangible, rational. This is the reason YadaYahowah was written, making it evident that it has become the Tree of Knowledge. Please pay attention. And if I may, this volume, the most recently published, speaks of all that's going to occur over the next 8 years, so that you're in a position to capitalize upon the Shavuot harvest, so that you're there as someone acknowledging and contributing to the teruah gleaning, so that you're celebrating the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah on the 24th of September of 2033, year 6000 Yah. And are among those cheering the return of Dowd as the Messiah and King, our Savior, with Yahuwah on Kippurim, this homecoming and family reunion, so that we can take responsibility for the mortal remnant of Yisrael that is allowed to re-enter the Garden of Eden, and we can instruct them based upon the tree of knowledge. So this narrative that God is providing, it explains the how, the why, the when, the where of man's relationship with God and how it was destroyed. It was actually destroyed by as much by omission as commission. As I said, Adam really didn't listen to God. He didn't respond to God's instructions. He didn't work. He was a deadbeat. He was a dependent. He couldn't be trusted. And he did what he was asked not to do. Mostly crimes of omission with one of commission. Now, this is something all of which must be understood if it is to be restored. For this to transpire, the lessons few have considered must be presented, such for the first time they can be understood. And the instruction then becomes, as I've said, actionable. This is the very essence of YadaYahowah. It's why it was written. It's why it's available to you free at YadaYah.com. It is absolutely and unequivocally the tree of knowledge. Etzah, Dayath. Now, equally insightful, every story that we have returned to reconsider in the Torah, God's presentation has turned out to be prophetic. While also historic, every narrative was presented for the benefit of those who experienced it, not for those that experienced it, I should say, but for those who are listening now. This narrative had no value whatsoever for Adam and Chawah. Didn't change their lives one iota. It's for us. And clearly it had no influence on the children of Israel during the Exodus and all the way to this point, because there's not a single aspect of what I'm sharing with you that 2 millennia of rabbis have been able to deduce. None of it. It's all for us, right here, right now. So while historic, we are the beneficiaries. We are learning from it now as never before. So realizing this, Yahweh was able to convey the events in the garden in a manner that would resonate with us, would guide us at this time. And doing so when the situation is now dire and the lesson is essential. And without it, the whole human experiment is for naught. Now, this is why Yahweh spoke of the Choter as he did through Yashayah, making one story of the two and explaining one with the other. The Choter is the tree of lives. That's why the Choter, the very sap that comes up through those roots that to nourish the tree, and the light of the sun representing Dowd, that cause it to grow and to produce its fruit, is all enabled by the 7 spirits of Yahuwah. The narrative on the Choter was Yada's coming out party. It was the moment I went from anonymous to named character in God's story. Returning back to Eden, I now have a full understanding of why that is. I will accept my responsibility. I will be as productive and fruitful as is possible. I will stand the storm. I will be like that marvelous tree that you'll see in the broader shot that stands over my left shoulder, the one that has weathered the storms and stood beside the sea for all to see. Well, in this narrative on a man and a woman, of God and the adversary of two trees, knowledge becomes the star of this show. It leads to life. And it is only when we come to appreciate the interactions between these individuals and ascertain their intent and their contributions that we find purpose in our lives. And so by featuring the tree of knowledge as the lead character throughout this story, both in the closing and the opening scenes of this narrative from our God, pursuant to the events of the garden, we are being invited to come full circle. From the garden to the garden, from the tree to the Choter. It is from its roots, buried long ago, that a Choter sucker would emerge, bearing fruit again, this time in YadaYahowah, to reacquaint the world with Dowd as the tree of lives, and to remind everyone who wants to have a relationship with God what God is seeking from them, to work with Him, to contribute to the relationship, to be observant, carefully considering everything that God has laid before us, and then to be responsible, to be reliable, to be trustworthy, to be someone He can trust off of this planet. Now, while I've made this point previously, it remains relevant to note that Yahweh communicated His instructions to Adam, to the man. But there's no indication He communicated directly to Chaw'ah. He didn't, well, in this case, she didn't even exist at this time. The implication is not only that Adam was conceived to learn from God, but also that Yahweh seems to prefer communicating through and working with Ben. It would be the man's responsibility to share Yahweh's instructions with women. Now, if you think that that's being sexist, then let me tell you how I responded to something that I read today. I shared this in passing in our Ocean studio. I have returned to the chapter prior to this one, in Bereshith, Genesis 1, speaking of the fourth day. And on the fourth day, Yahweh introduces two men who he calls luminaries. Their job is to be enlightening, to share illumination with the world. And while he calls both of these men, who are signs of the Moed, and Moedim actually, the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony, and therefore signs, which would be something that would be written, a sign of the Moedim. I've written 3 volumes just on the 7 Moedim. And that these are the 2 men who would actually fulfill them. Dowd, Pesach, Matz, and Bekudim, Yada, Shabuah, Teruah, working together on Kippurim, and intertwined is the tree of lives and knowledge on Sukkah. We are the 2 men that fulfill the Moedim, just as Yahweh said of them. And while Yahweh said that both men, from his perspective, were great, esteemed, valuable, empowering, enriching, that one was not only greater than the other, the one who was the Gadol, the most Gadol, he was king. He's sovereign. He runs the government. He's in charge. He's authorized. And the other is subservient to him, reports to him, works for him. Just as the moon reflects the sun's light. Now, you could say, all right, I have written more than all the prophets combined, probably 10 times what Dowd has written. Well, shouldn't I get a better position than under the king? Heck, no. I'm thrilled. Okay, I'm making a sacrifice of my body. Shouldn't that, make us more like equals? No. Good God. I was thrilled being anonymous. And so when I read this, and I'm reading this and it's saying, oh, wow, the greater luminary, he's the sovereign. He's king. And the lesser luminary works under him, for him, serving him. Oh my goodness, my heart soared. And that should be everyone's reaction. God is giving more responsibility here to men. He's not giving any more benefits to men. We're to work together. But the one that has the responsibility has the less beneficial part of the deal. If I make a mistake going forward, I guess, hey, no, I'm reporting to you. I'm your responsibility. You're challenged now to fix. I'll do my best, but you're in charge. Something blows up. Dowd, what do you want to do? It's your call, man. I'll do what you want, but your call. That is the best news of all. So if you are a woman saying, wait a minute, God says he prefers to work with men, which he said, and he prefers to instruct men, and then it's our responsibility to work with the women in our lives and instruct them and support them and teach them and be responsible for helping them, then that should make your heart soar. You get the benefits without the responsibility. It doesn't mean you don't have to work. God was really clear. The women are going to work. He wanted Chawah to work. He wanted Chawah to help, to be a benefit, to make a contribution. You need to do that, but you don't bear the responsibility. It's why I went personally so, I was so uncomfortable with YAHOWAH's switch from me being anonymous as Yada. For the first 10 years, we did this together. To reading about the Choter and saying, oh my God, there is no one else in human history that this can speak of other than me. And this means I'm not anonymous. That means that I'm a named player in your story, and an important one. And that's not good, God. That means that now I go from having opportunity to responsibility, to accountability. It's just so much more pressure. And so I would caution anyone that says this is not fair, I don't like God's response here, to think it through. I celebrated knowing that I was subservient to Dowd, and that he can rest assured, as most kings cannot, that those, at least this guy beneath him, and I'm certain it's true for every covenant member, we don't want his job. We're very happy to serve him. We're delighted that he has that responsibility. And everyone should look at it that way. So I would encourage you to view it that way. And listen, there is, and God makes this quite clear in his synopsis of the situation, that women are more emotional. Emotion is good. Caring, loving, supporting. Emotions are really valuable. Men are more cerebral, and he makes that point too. They're more thoughtful. Now, that doesn't mean that it's ubiquitous. In fact, today it's almost indistinguishable. That's the way we were designed when we were operating as we should. Men were more rational, women were more emotional. That way together we experience synergism, and we're far more than we would be independently. And that's God's view of things. Now, when it comes to work, when it comes to being observant, the first two things that God asked for here, being rational is more effective than being emotional. When it comes to raising children and doing the nurturing part of that relationship and being supportive and engaging in this relationship, being loving and emotional is actually more appropriate and more beneficial. So we were designed to be not only compatible, but mutually beneficial to one another this way. Now, this is not a Christian lording over thing. This is not an Islamic you own them thing. This is different attributes and different responsibilities. Yahweh Almighty said, "It is not good, productive, or beneficial for the man to exist alone by himself." Oh, I'll explain to that just in a moment. "I will engage and continually act on his behalf, producing for him a helper and a supporter, an easer, one who assists and serves, one who is a positive influence, who rescues, aids, renews, provides benefits with the strength and power to accomplish all of these tasks, like, similar to, and in the manner, even according to, his corresponding counterpart, Negadhu, describing that which is straightforward, right for him, open to him, close in his proximity. Barishith 2:18. There are three enormously important insights right here. First of all, we go immediately from the discussion of the trees. Immediately from the discussion of the trees. So that these instructions were given. The next line is that it's not good for a man to be alone. Breaks my heart. It really breaks my heart. What this means is that after Yahweh communicated those instructions to Adam, he immediately recognized that Adam wasn't listening. He realized that Adam was not willing to work. He realized that Adam was not paying any attention. He was not observant. And so for God to say it's not good for man to be alone, what does that mean? What does it mean? Because I'm going to share something with you that I don't think anyone's said before. Because for God to say this right here at this part of the story, that it's not good for man to be alone, it means that God was leaving man. He was going to separate himself from man. He was going to spend more time away from man than with man. That's what it means. And when you think that through, because that's the only valid conclusion, because if God was spending all of his time or most of his time with man, he would never say it's not good for man to be alone, because man wouldn't have been alone. So it means that in immediate aftermath of God providing instructions to Adam, God realized that man was not going to be what he wanted, that man was not listening, that man was not observant, and that man was not contributing. And therefore, there was no merit at all in spending an inordinate amount of times with man. He was going to have to back away. This is like getting a goldfish and putting the goldfish in the bowl, and you see it swim around the bowl 3 or 4 times and blow some bubbles, and you say, "Oh, that's really neat. I like having the goldfish in the bowl," and then being so bored with it that you forget to change the water. Like an animal in a cage. You've given all the food it could possibly want, perfect conditions, everything, and it just sleeps all day and ignores you. That's what it means. And that's why we call it the fall of man. Man had to grow up. The other things that are interesting is that when God chose to engage, he wasn't just letting that goldfish in the bowl swim on its own and die. Nope. He was going to give that goldfish, the man, the opportunity through many lives to become observant, to engage and make a contribution, to work. You know how many hours it takes? Well, I'll tell you, 100,000 to write 35 books, 25,000 pages of amplified translations and commentary. I'm going to give him a chance to engage, to make a contribution, to do something worthwhile, to show that he is reliable and dependable. And so God says, I'm going to give a man a helper, someone to be with that's really far more ideal for him. The separation between God and man at that point was just too enormous. God would not have a man with whom he could openly communicate, dearly love, accomplish great things with until Dowd. 3,000 years later. And since that time, I don't think there's been anyone since. The closest has been the growing of this tree of knowledge, but in that sense, God cheated. Cheated, I mean, in a very loving sort of way. He applied his 7 spirits to make certain that it would happen. So there we are. Now, there's another aspect of this. When Yahweh says that he created woman as a supporter and helper of man, what this says is that since he explained what he wanted to achieve with Adam, he wanted Adam to be observant, and he wanted Adam to make a contribution to work with him. And he gave Adam instructions that he wanted him to process and respond appropriately to. That was not the purpose of the woman, was it? None of these things are directed at God. The woman's purpose was to support the man, to engage in a relationship with the man, for the man and the woman to be together. So you can say from this that man was created to engage in a relationship with God and flunked it, by the way, that opportunity. And that woman was created to engage in a productive relationship with man. She also flunked that responsibility. But they're very different. Very, very different. Also, the MotherGoddessCult wanted to make a statement where they took Yahweh's words out of context and they truncated them to create the myth that because God created man in his image and that he created a memorable man and a woman to bore, that therefore that must also apply to in his image, even though it was his image, and even though image, Teslem, is masculine, that must make God a hermaphrodite, mother and father. This makes it very clear. Man was created in the image of God. Woman was created in the image of man. She is man's counterpart. She is man's neged. She corresponds to man. All right? Those are some profound insights. I can assure you, and this analysis of Bereshith Genesis 2:18, that what you have just heard, some 20 profoundly important insights. No one has considered these things previously. And they're all valuable in coming to understand what God is seeking from us. Because when you understand this, as men and women, we know what we're supposed to do if we want to earn favor with God again. And we need to earn it. We need to show that we can be reliable, that we will listen, that we will be observant, that we will engage in a productive way. I can assure you it's not about belief. So this is just a continuation of essential lessons, because it means that Yahweh created Adam to enjoy a relationship with him, while he created the woman to be in a relationship with the man. Adam was to work with God, while Chawah was to work alongside Adam. Quite literally, woman was conceived by God to help and support man. And it was in man's image that woman was created, not God's. The creation of woman was so basic to man's needs, the resulting version, while wonderful, didn't turn out to be the first choice. So before creating the woman, knowing that man couldn't be alone, he had designed him for companionship, he was just inadequate. So then Yahweh Almighty, he fashioned and formed out of the earth every living animal of the expansive environment, in addition to every bird of the sky, which he then brought to the man in order to see what he would call them and how he would greet and how he would welcome them. Ma kara lahu. Therefore, everything for the benefit of the relationship that the man, Adam, approached and designated, called out to, and encountered, kara lahu, that became the name and the reputation of that living soul. Bereshith, Genesis 2:19. So Yahweh, at this point, is still trying to help the man. He is introducing the man to other life forms. He is conversing and interacting, trying to make it work. We're shown that the man evaluated these life forms that God had created, that served to define Yahweh's purpose in creating life, because he not only took the time to share his creative genius with the man, he made certain that we would be aware of this special moment in time. This is the one interaction that God shared with us. What does that tell you about him? That he's interested in us having an enjoyable and productive relationship with animals. That he loves animals and wanted to share the amazing nature of animals with us. And that obviously they had a discussion with these animals so that Adam could learn about them and therefore could appropriately name them based upon their reputations. Tells you what we're headed to when we come back to Eden, doesn't it? Tells you what God values, which is life. It tells you that Yahweh is a father and he wants to share the best of what he has accomplished, which is, the thing that we as parents often think, that when we're parents and we achieve something that's wonderful, we want to share it with our children. So did God. So it's relevant, however, that God is not depicted doing any of these things with the woman. You can make of that what you will. So that we don't lose sight of the reason that we return to this narrative, you'll notice that just because all of the animals have souls, with nephesh being a feminine noun, it does not turn males into females. As a matter of fact, with the animals, they were all categorized under hue, masculine. Similarly, while Yahweh has both a nephesh and a ruach, both of which are grammatically feminine, does not alter his projection of his preferred gender. He always presents himself as masculine and singular. When the MotherGoddessCult was initially formed through embittered rebellion, there was a confabulation of lies. They not only turned Chaw'ah, the Hebrew noun denoting wisdom, into their mother goddess, they sought to condemn me for not recognizing the feminine aspects of the Ruach spirit. But ladies and gentlemen, the opposite was true. I had actually gone too far. I had made way too much of the distinction between the feminine and masculine nouns, especially with Ruach, which is where they came up with their methodology and mythology in the first place. They accused me of not recognizing the voice of Spirit Mom, when in fact I had gone too far. And I had projected far too much on the Ruach being feminine. They lied. And while I went nowhere near the absurdity that Yahweh has a hermaphrodite nature with two personas, two creators, one a father, the other the mother, or that the maternal manifestation of God's nature had a voice, and that we should try to seek what she said and speak for her, I am guilty of over-extrapolating, which has led to what we humorously call a mama-ectomy of the text. Now, just as this experience with the animals was conceived by Yahweh as a learning experience for Adam, such is the nature of the Torah and the Nabiim for us. For example, I have often considered God's narrative regarding these trees in the garden and of Chawah's response, denoting an entire family hour and the YAHOWAH blog just a couple of months ago to the very nature of Chawah in the garden and her relationship to Adam. And I have analyzed every nuance of Yahweh's instructions of the Choter through Yashayah on a score of occasions, 20 times. And while I recognize that Dayath, representing the sixth of the seven spiritual attributes given to the Choter, was the name of the tree of knowledge, I did not notice that the fourth gift of the Ruach to the Choter, Etzah, was to adroitly identify him with the Etz, the tree in the garden. At issue here is perhaps the most important lesson of all. The more Shamar observant we become, the more we Yada know. The more we Yada, the more we come to Banah, understand. Through Chokmah, thinking intelligently. Eventually, after decades of study, we can Parah, produce the fruit that is offered by the EtzDayath, the tree of knowledge. This is the purpose of the Choter, making his Nesh sign YadaYahowah. Now, this is to say, Yahweh has given us what we need to process, to know and understand. But process requires a lifetime of work. It's not a data dump. We are not given Chokmah, but instead afforded the means to it. This is how it will be forevermore. We need to work at it so that our study makes a contribution to our shared knowledge. And that is what makes eternity interesting. It what makes life productive. What makes the relationship enjoyable for Yahweh. And that means we must constantly refine our conclusions based upon the evidence. The more we learn, we must correct our mistakes once we're appraised of more information, greater understanding, and then build upon that such that it's verifiable and true. It is how we grow. And without growth, we are, and God also cannot be infinite. We can't even be interesting. This process has to exist for us and for God. So returning to my misappropriation, whereby I pushed the envelope of Hebrew grammar too far, which means the mother goddesses flat out lied. Regarding Ruach, my projection of femininity appeared necessary to explain something that Dowd later resolved. I learned more. I learned something no one had ever seen in all of human existence. In this case, I learned from our king. At issue was the mechanism behind the matzah and my confusion over why we were asked to approach the Isha, which is the feminine rendering of fire during the Mikre. And since there was a prophetic reference elsewhere to the Ruach pertaining to an illuminating apparel in Yashayah, I thought, well, perhaps that's how God resolved the issue of our guilt, covering us with it, projecting this onto the symbolism of the fire. However, matzah is not about the addition of something, but instead the removal of the contaminating fungus of yeast, representing religious and political guilt. It's not covered over with light. It's taken into the ultimate darkness. So the moment I came to realize that Dowd's Bashar body fulfilled Pesach, opening the door to life, making him the tree of lives, and that his nephesh soul, feminine, carried our guilt away, depositing it in the darkness of Sheol on matzah, never to be seen again, my conjecture regarding the Spirit's garment of light became unnecessary clutter. Similarly, I came to realize that I had been wrong regarding the Ruach departing from Dowd during his fulfillment of the Mikra. That's what I read into. My God, why have you forsaken me? But it's Yahweh separating from his son, not the Spirit. Yahweh told us explicitly when the Ruach came upon his son, Dowd, that it would never leave, would never separate from him, ever. And this means that the Ruach protected Dowd's nephesh in Sheol and facilitated his release. Now, this realization leads to another. Since the Spirit entered Sheol, the place of separation from God, the Ruach cannot be Yahweh, but instead is a manifestation of his influence, a projection of his power, of his protection. The Spirit of Yahweh is the most powerful and capable tool in the universe. Yahweh sent his Ruach, the Spirit of Yahweh, to reside within the Choter. That does not make the Choter Yahweh. It does not make the Choter a girly version of Yahweh. It doesn't make the Choter a mother. The Spirit of Yahweh is a projection of Yahweh's influence, his protection. It's not God. The Spirit of Yahweh is the most powerful and capable tool in the universe. Now, as for the Isha, fire, there was a far better interpretation, providing a lesson for us all. Fire transforms dead and dying organic material and transforming it into light and radiant energy. I've shared this on so many of our programs. It is symbolic of the superior vessel that Yahweh intends for our souls so that we can discard the limiting and decaying nature of our physical bodies. When our nephesh is encapsulated in radiant energy and light, we are not only perfected and become immortal, we are enabled, we're empowered, we're enriched by such a great magnitude. In science, this transformation is measured in the square of the speed of light. So this progression from a thoughtful interpretation to a vastly superior and evidenced comprehension of Yahweh's methodology comes with observation and contemplation, hard work, building over decades. And the beauty of this process is that it becomes exponential. The more we know and understand, the better we are equipped to deduce a myriad of previously unseen insights and grow in our comprehension of God, and then become much more productive as that tree of knowledge. So after having written 35 books based upon uniquely amplified translations of the oldest extant resources, with words scribed and scrubbed of man's religious corruptions, I've come to learn more about God than anyone since the last of the prophets 25 centuries ago. There were thousands of profound and unheralded insights to share. With the proper pronunciation of Yahweh's name and the recognition of his son's achievement foremost among them. And as my knowledge and understanding progressed, these books were augmented and refined. I think we'll conclude this program at this point. Thank you for listening.